So the final topic area is small wind testing and certification. You know, sort of the end goal for many wind turbines is to finally become certified and achieve that credential. Don't mute yourself anymore. Talk all you want, ask all the questions you have, because this is the last. Anything we say here is based on the past, and we don't know what the future is like, and everything that we've done this week will be posted. So the objective with this topic area is to focus on the certification of a small wind turbine to applicable standards such as IEC 61400-2 or the new forthcoming ACP 101-1. The work effort includes a turbine design review, turbine certification testing to one of those standards or both, and certify the turbine. You can also include listing of the turbine assembly in this topic area, which is electrical safety certification. And if the turbine is not able to successfully complete the design evaluation, then we've got that go, no go decision in there. Listing to the electrical safety standards can be the sole effort in this topic area if the wind turbine is already certified. Listing to UL standards, including the controls, inverter, turbine subcomponents, shall have priority over standards that do not apply in the US. Standards that do not apply in the US may be covered in this effort. However, listing and certification to standards that do apply in the US should be a secondary effort to certification of the turbine to the -2 or ACP 101 standards that do apply here in the US. All right, so I'll leave that for you to chew on if you have some of these issues to prioritize. It should be noted that the turbine size limits are different now. It's a bit of a moving target between -2 and 101-1. You've got the 200 square meters, and now you've got the 150 kilowatts. And that we don't have 101.1-1 quite yet. It's finalized, I would say, and it's in the hands of the American National Standards Institute. They don't touch it except for they've done a little reformatting and sent it back to us to check, make sure everything's okay. And I basically only found one digit, the number 2 got accidentally placed in there. Otherwise, it looks good. But it should be out in January. The project results are expected to lead to an improved certified production turbine available in the US market. Okay. The tasks include the common task of summary of work effort. There's a design review with a go, no go decision. Task 4.3 is getting the turbine commissioned at the test site, wherever that might be. Complete the commissioning tests of the turbine system jointly with the test facility and or the certifying body, which reminds me of, I believe it was the Pike was tested at the Regional Test Center in Kansas. So we had, I was there from SWCC, and a test engineer from NREL was there because it was a regional test center, and the Kansas test site were there, and we all three worked together on commissioning that certification test. When a proposal in this topic area is for listing only, then this task consists of provision of a test plan approved by the testing national, the NREL, nationally recognized testing lab, such as Intertech or UL. 4.4 is the design load derivation and limit state analysis according to the standards, your strength evaluation. And then task 4.5 is certification. And a report summarizing the certification or listing process. All right. So I think everyone's fully educated on these design evaluations by now. This one again, this one, unlike type certification, is done with just NREL. It's sort of a pre-review of your design report before you submit it to the certification body for certification. So it's quite a beneficial step for everyone, really. The intent of the review is to ensure that the turbine to be tested is likely to pass the structural design review by the certification body. And if it looks like it's not going to go, it could be a no-go. This is essentially like, follows the requirements of the limit state analysis in the -2 edition 3 standard, where all the details lie. When this proposal includes listing or is for listing only, then the design review of the equipment being listed and the documentation it's a review of the equipment being listed. So you try to describe your inverter to us. We will probably enlist some different experts for a particular listing kind of review, and provide the documentation that's been requested for the documentation review or the construction review by the NREL, nationally recognized testing laboratory. All right, and the deliverables match the task. First one is you send in that summary of work effort. 3 months later is the design review. So it kind of gets, hits the ground running. But you've been working on this turbine for a while, and you've got a lot of this at hand. And then 5 months later, it's time to send in a report documenting the successful installation of the turbine and the signed commissioning report. And so there's, a lot of tasks here. Delays happen, but the intent here is to get it installed and running at the test site within that first 5 months. 19 months later now is a copy of the design load document identifying the method that was used and the design loads resulting from it, as well as a copy of the design documentation containing the limit state analysis. So it's sort of a draft of your loads analysis. And then at the end, 21 months later, is a report highlighting how it went with certification. Copies of all the final certification test reports, the certificates are all submitted with the report. And then you're certified. And as usual, send in those quarterly reports. So scoring criteria with this topic area, 25% of the score is related to proof documentation that that demonstrates that the turbine system is likely to comprise a significant share of the distributed wind turbine market, and that the company can provide the associated installation and long-term maintenance support. Yeah, so it's sort of showing that you're capable of being a successful supplier of this small wind turbine. Get it certified, sell it, install it, and support it. So you've got your projected energy output, cost, power curve, current and expected manufacturing capacity, the details of the turbine, including the design life, O&M requirements and costs, warranty coverage, listing of the inverter and all the subcomponents that may be listed or there's a plan to list them. Sales history, recent sales history, or even if there's none, that's okay. And the size of the fleet and tower options, how you plan to operate a dealer network, existing or pending IEC certifications, if any, capabilities to provide support, yep, including warranty reserve, and your cost of energy calculation. So 20%, that was 25, 20% extent to which the turbine system will impact the market. Recent experience, soundness of the production plan to ensure the turbine is ready for the market. Percent of US-based manufacturing for the final turbine system, including the turbine, the tower, electronics, which in the US here, compared to other distributed energy resources, distributed wind can still maintain a pretty high domestic content. Estimated US installations in the first year of certification after it. Estimated number of exported units. So it's fine, Ken, to have export intentions and fully supported. Technical and financial capability of sustaining the project's objective over the period, and documentation of your financial status. And then 30% on a more technical aspect of the wind generator is ready for certification and or listing, and you've got a plan that will lead to certification and or listing. Okay. And so evidence that the turbine is ready. So a history of deployment, prototype testing, demonstrating some reliable operation and functionality. Some of your design, product development process, like upgrades planned to a certified turbine that are sufficient to require new certification, is also evidence of readiness when combined with sufficient engineering preparation. That was an interesting one. Evidence that the turbine is ready for listing, if you're going that route, such as a list of components that are listed. If you're going for that full system listing, then you need to check, you're going to have to look at every single subcomponent and check the listing of each of them for that construction review. And then some components that are not listed with notes on the listing standard for each component that is not already listed. So that's getting you ready. You should be doing that anyway to be ready for turbine system listing to 6142. Summary of any prototype testing conducted. And that can go in as an attachment that doesn't add to the page count, which you must stay beneath the maximum. Ability to deliver test turbine system to the test site within 60 days of subcontract execution. If you need more time, then you just explain why. Or the ability to get your documents and samples and what's needed to the NREL to start the listing process within a couple months. Evidence that the turbine testing can be completed at the testing facility within the 21-month period. So this evidence shall include the test site wind speed distribution, evaluation of the need for site calibration, things like that. Verification that the turbine is in the queue for certification or listing. So that's, that means if you're going to apply for this in early 2022, then you should be talking to your certification body or certification verification agency, same thing. So you provide here the turbine certification plan, the budget and schedule. So you got to work together with the certification body to get that. Confirm that the company has the applicable standards, documents, and understands the requirements for obtaining certification. Include in the plan how you plan to determine your loads, material safety factors that will be used, and if it's listing, a budget and a schedule for that listing with the NREL. And then point G here, preliminary loads report with what is required for the certification sought. The document must include a synopsis of derivation approach. Preliminary load approach can be different than approach plan for the final certification loads. For instance, the SLM may be used for this part of the application, even though you plan to finish up some aeroelastic modeling for final certification. And then the final 25% is your team. Adequate team with supporting resumes of the team members. Demonstrate that all required expertise is available with either in-house or consultants. If no one has any wind certification experience, provide background on experience or expertise that qualifies for this effort, or use a consultant. And finally, demonstrate ability to execute. Yep, you could demonstrate your past experiences with staying on time and finishing projects, staying on budget, with references on previous project experience, including letters if they are available. The funding amount for this topic area is up to $190,000 for turbine certification. And if I recall, that's pretty much in line with Dean Davis's estimate, which was around 200K or so, 200, a little over. 80,000 additional if you're going the route of loads measurements, mechanical load measurements, and $80,000 for turbine listing to UL 6142, or an extra, or $200,000 max for inverter listing, 20% price participation. Few examples here include the Berge XL15 in round 4 back in 2015 started the process of testing and certifying the XL15 to AWEA 9.1. And I got to work on that a bit before coming to NREL through when I was at SWCC. There, Berge did most of that work testing at the factory there in Norman, Oklahoma, with some adjunct data from a different site, windier site, for the duration testing. Pretty similar to what Evance did in the UK. One turbine did a lot of the highly instrumented testing at a test site, and another turbine was way up in the some windy islands for the duration test. QED Wind Power from Arizona is using a 2019 award for certification testing to AWEA 9.1, and then a 2020 award for listing the complete turbine system to UL 6142. And Intergrid used this topic area, is currently using this topic area for 2021 award for some next steps in the listing of their IG25 inverter, including software verification to UL standard 1998, which I would describe briefly as future-proofing the subsequent changes and recertifications of this inverter, because now if you certify the software, it's a step forward in optimized recertification of the particular piece of hardware that relies on software programming to operate. Developing simulator for the testing portion of the listing, and doing some component improvements and identifying component alternatives in this topsy-turvy supply chain world we live in right now. I think that's it. So yeah, what questions or does anyone have on this particular topic area at the end of the day, at the end of the week?
I have a quick question. This is Dan Clunas here, Windurance.
Hey, Dan. Yeah, hi.
Now that I've safely pulled over to the side of the road. What if certification ends up being a greater lift than it turned out to be when the CIP was scoped? It's a moving target. And what if, a project would seem to lag behind or grow amorphously after the award had been awarded? Is there a way to go back and re-up, to speak crudely?
Right. Yeah, it's a good question.
So yeah, so the simple answer is yes. And sorry, Brent, didn't mean to cut you off. But I would add kind of two things to this. One is aim high, okay? And we know that the certification process, especially working with NRELs, is to a degree a moving target, okay? So NREL does, as part of this, and Brent can dive into this a little bit more, our expectation is that a lot of the deliverables that you would provide to us are things that are kind of on their way to being provided to the NREL. And so we can act as an initial reviewer, but the last thing you want to do is kind of get into a bring me a rock situation with the NREL, because they're going to charge you every time you bring them a rock, and then they're going to tell you to paint the rock green or something of that nature. And so working with either a consultant that you identify yourself and have on the team, which I highly recommend, whether working with us so that we help support that, though we're not going to be as effective as a contractor. I think there are things that can be done there to help control the costs, but when you spec this out, expect to be going back and forth to the NREL a little bit and aim a little high in regards to your proposal. Now, obviously, the number that we have put there from last year, I mean, it could change this year, but from last year is still the upper limit. And so you can't go above that, these numbers right here. But I think it makes more sense to try and aim high than try and aim low, because the prices are only likely to go up. All right. That being said, if we go through this, and we know there's a time delay, so you're going to put your proposal in as history as a guide in March, and the project isn't going to start until 9 months later, okay, or 6 months later, 7 months later, and we know prices go up, and then we know that this is a 2-year contract, and so theoretically it's basically 3 years since you wrote the proposal to the project ending, and stuff happens. And so if we get a year and a half into the project and it's clear that things are costing more, or that something has happened and we have to go back and look at it, then we'll pick those up on a case-by-case basis. We can't guarantee now that obviously if it comes in at 30K more that we will fund it, because it could be that we don't have any more funding from Congress and we can't fund it, okay? But our intent is to work with you to be successful. And if 2 years down the road, it's costing a bit more money, or we had to move to a different site because of something that happened, our goal is to work with you to be successful.
Thanks.
Does that kind of answer it?
Yes.
Okay.
And Dan, if there are delays, significant delays for whatever reason, then we have the ability to modify the subcontract, extend the period of performance a bit to, if needed. Delays happen,
especially around COVID.
especially. What else? So Joe, you wanted to talk about listing. Do you have any, what do you want to talk about? I know you just like to talk about it.
I was curious. Thanks. Thank you, sir. I was curious, Ian, perhaps, is there a plan to adjust any of the wording in the RFP about listing specifically types of deliverables, deliverable schedule? You know, as you know, they're the one in the driver's seat. So is there a way we can be a little less prescriptive and just kind of really get down to what you want to see at that stage? You know what I'm saying? And be a little less prescriptive in the text about what the letter from the NRTL must say. And I'd be happy to help you line up a little bit more if Intertech or anybody isn't, their schedule isn't working. You know, I'd be happy to help you line up a little bit more. You know, the deliverables, flat out, the deliverables don't line up right with the listing process. They don't.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Sometimes that makes it hard to budget. And then, you know, to Dan's point, right, things change. There's change orders, there's follow-up, there's failures, there's, right. So I don't know. It's kind of falls under its own thing. I understand why you have it, and you know, here with you know, as certification, right? But some of the wording doesn't jive together very well. So I do think it could use. You know, I think maybe we're thinking about doing that. You know, I think it's a good idea, and you know, I'd be happy to help with some of that if you're at a standstill.
Excellent.
Yeah. No. Great. Thank you for that. I have to say it because I'm contractually obliged to, which is we can't talk about any future solicitations. So I couldn't tell you whether the wording was changing or not. But your point is really well taken. That aside, though, certainly this is trying to be helpful. And if you want to do something different than what is in here, just express that in your proposal. So if you came back and said, maybe we didn't change it for whatever reason, contracts wouldn't allow us to, or something of that nature. If you wanted to propose a different schedule or interim deliverables, or say, yep, all of this sounds great, except I'm gonna, for the task, for the deliverable for 2.4, I'm going to provide this because that's the guidance that's been given to me by the NREL. Please do so, and don't feel constrained necessarily to these dates, to only having these 6 deliverables. And if something really won't work for you in the way you're doing it, like we have here a final report. Well, okay, if the final report, I mean, if you want to put in the final report as a final report, great, but just add 3 more deliverables under whichever task that would be, the 3rd one, under the 4th one, let's say the design load, say, all right, we're going to give you that, we're going to give you the final on the date that you say, but we're going to have 3 interim ones in between there. We're going to have a draft one, and we'll give you the draft one 3 months ahead of time, so you can pay me for the draft one so that I can pay the NREL to actually look at it. That's perfectly acceptable. And so even if we rewrite this, if it's not perfect, don't sweat it, and propose what works for you as a company to make it work, as compared to trying to fit into this structure too heavily.
Right. So along the lines of what you were saying earlier and before numerous times, if you want to propose other deliverables or areas where payments can be, because obviously that's what it comes down to in the way the NRTL works, you know, propose other things. So put that in the proposal itself. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So like a draft or something, the version that's going to go to the NREL for comments or something of that nature. And we're more than happy to pay for that before, knowing that we pay you, NREL will pay you after you do the deliverable, but in a lot of cases, the NREL wants payment before. And
Right.
understand that puts strain on small companies. So think about that as you write it. And if there's things that would help alleviate that, just try to work that in, and then we'll work with you to make it happen.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, very, very important comment there, Joe. Really important.
I aim to please.
Yep, but we will take you up on your offer to help align
Yeah.
because I think that's important and it's on our list to do.
And we do have that captured in our lessons learned document. That misalignment between what we're asking for and what they can get is close, but we wrote that down, and if there's a future, we'll try to remember to work on that.
Thank you.
I have one question now.
Please go ahead.
So let's say I do not have a wind turbine now, but like we make one with like we have the one which is like we call it as a prototype, but we're gonna make another one that's our own on our own expense, and it's still prototype because we are not selling it anything. But can we apply for that as for certification and installation category without going into the design and performance and optimization and all that rounds, without going for a prototype development? But this is like the one which we spend money on developing it, and now we think maybe we can start selling it, but now we want to like kind of certify it. So can we apply directly for a certification category?
Do you want to answer that, Brent, or I can?
Well, if I heard it right, you don't have to go through the other topic areas to get to this topic area.
Yep.
But
Okay.
you do have to demonstrate that you're ready. So you'll demonstrate that you did prototype testing, product development, loads, structural analysis, and all those criteria that demonstrate that that this turbine is ready to go to this stage. But you don't have to do that work in these previous topic areas.
So in this case, most of the times I can do like CFD and FEA, and would that be considered as like a structural proof or something, or that's like kind of another topic, or you won't consider it as into like, let's say I kind of like develop this prototype and I have a supporting documentation for fee and CFD and all that, plus working prototype. So would that be considered, or is there like a certain process I have to follow all the way from scratch based on your guidance or documentation or something like that?
Yeah, the certification is just conformity assessment, and it basically the certification body says that the design was done according to the guidelines and the standards, and the testing was done according to the standards. So I think what you're asking is, or the answer is, you have to follow the requirements of the standards. So if option A, B, and C are there for your design, either simplified load or aeroelastic modeling simulation or load measurements, and you choose a CFD method that's not eligible or prescribed in the standards, then that's the certification body is not going to be able to utilize that as a design tool because it's not one of the allowable options in the standard, if that makes sense.
Okay. So let's say if we plan to like certify it, so how long would it take for like the certification for that windmill? Like, is it like a time period, or do you consider the data? Let's say we started collecting the data for output data for certain period of time. Do you consider that, or we have to like kind of install it in your facility, wherever the approved facility, and then the period starts from there. And certain amount of period you observe it or collect the data and then certify it, something like that.
I think you're able to do all the work within this 21-month window of this work effort. Like the field, Patty knows, the field testing for certification, the writing of the reports can take some time. Maybe in a perfect world, you could do all that in 9 months, but it takes people usually a good solid year for the field testing and reporting. And if you experience issues in the field requiring some restarting or changing of the design, then that can extend longer. And then the certification process is an evaluate. And in the meantime, you're doing a lot of design calculations. And then the certification process of reviewing test reports, possibly witnessing the testing, and then a review of that design analysis can take, many months, depending on the level of back and forth. Bring me a rock, or the level of back and forth to resolve any nonconformities found in the review process. So, a year and a half later, you could be certified, but it's there's a range of time it takes there, depending on how it goes.
And I think that you had mentioned whether kind of work that you had done previously, whether that kind of can count or be included. And I think generally the answer is no. So, I mean, you're developing a model. Okay, so that's great. The verification that you have done with that model, that might count, but again, that's up to the certification agent, not to us. Okay. But the certification agent, if you're doing it at your own site, they're going to want to have surveyed the site there. And Joe certainly has a lot of experience, and other people who have done this have a lot of experience in this, but they're going to want to check out your site. They're going to want to certify that all your instrumentation is correct. They're going to want to go through all of that. And in all likelihood, they're not going to accept anything that happened before they started talking to you about it. So they're going to want to make sure that it's all fine before you start down this process. Though stuff like model verification and validation, some of that stuff could be done beforehand, but again, they will look at it and they will tell you whether they feel that you've done enough of that or whether they want you to do more. That's not us, that's them.
I'm going to chime in there. Thanks, Brent and Ian. But I think the key to advise George is early engagement. That's the key. That's what I've experienced being on the test side. That you start talking to your certification body well before, you're putting your technical file together, your design file, and you're getting their advice on that before you start trying to roll up at site. You have to be, maybe there'll be some aspects of testing and certification that go in parallel, but you really have to have got talking to the certification body, get a good rapport relationship, two-way communications going. Because the first time round, it's quite a steep learning curve for companies if they've not done that.
That's good.
Another question, which is like, do we have to have like the wind turbine placed in NREL's facility, or I can choose the area anywhere it's convenient for me or cheap for me or something like that? Because why I am asking is like, I'm doing the development back in India because it's cheap there, but I would have to like have a wind turbine in US also. So I'm trying to understand where exactly should I be like developing it, or like import it from India and just give it to you for a certification or something like that. So in case like if I find somebody on the beach or something where there is always a good amount of wind, or do I have to go like Colorado or like some other place? Is there any preference where you have, or it's easy for you to like go to certification, or it can like, or you can come to like my property? So let's say I'm in Georgia, so can I put it in my property, and then would it be considered as like a
Okay.
certification
Yep.
entity.
So under CIP, we do not require, but we highly encourage, and it's borderline requirement, that testing be done in the United States. And that's, again, because we're using taxpayer money, so US taxpayer money. And so unless there's a huge justification of why you can't do it in the United States, the testing should be done in the United States. The location of the testing is between you and the certification body that you are engaging with. And so there are certainly a handful of test sites around the country. NREL is one of them, but Spanish Forks is another. In Texas, there are some that are already been gone through a kind of a review by the certification agents, and they accept those as test locations. Or you can check your own site. And Berge Wind Power did this. They set up the turbine at their shop, and they had the certification bodies, SWCC, come out and make sure that everything was okay at their site. But it's going to be up to the certification body to determine whether your site is appropriate or not. And to a degree, NREL, the funder through CIP, we don't really care where it happens in the United States. It really has to be between you and the certification entity to agree to the location, and the location has to meet the requirements of the certification agent if they're going to accept that data. Brent, do you have an addition, or anybody else, Patty? Other people have gone through this a lot. So
another point to make here is that if you're doing a site, you're doing the testing yourself at a new site, the certification body is going to have to do a lot more verification and a lot more work to verify that you're set up to do the right thing, you're doing the right thing, and your data is good. If you go to someplace like Spanish Fork, where they've already done a lot of certifications, the certification bodies have worked with them, they know their procedures, they know their equipment, then there's a lot less work for the certification body and a lot less cost of the certification body's effort. So those are the kind of things.
And so generally, I would recommend that if you've never done this before or don't have deep experience with certification of small wind turbines, you go to a place that has done it before, and have them help you do it. Because trying to do it on your own at your own location and not having done it more, then it's just a lot of work.
Yeah,
I was going to just contribute there and just say that there's a certification body coming in and maybe going over how you did the test and doing an audit on you and type of thing. So that would be like an ISO 17065 certification body. But I suppose the alternative is you could subcontract out to an ISO 17025 organization. Certainly that's something that we've done in the UK. You know, you get a test done by 17025 accredited test organization, and that, as Ian was saying, or as Robert was saying, was it's easier for the certification body to basically take that report and not have to really do anything other than just receive it and just make sure it fits with the rest of the work that's being looked at as part of the certification exercise.
And Joe put a comment here, and Joe, hop on if you want to, which I think is also really valid. I mean, and Berge did it at his location because that was cheap and easy for him to do, and he had staff on site, right. and that made a lot of sense. Again, Berge has a lot of experience in this, and he was engaging with people who had a lot of experience with it, and therefore that makes perfect sense to me that it's easier to do it at a client site if the client really knows what they're doing or is engaged with people who really know what they're doing.
We went through a wee exercise there where we got a turbine tested for configuration for the Asia area, and basically we did our own sort of setting up the tests at a customer site not far from our factory in Blackpool.
Right.
And we had a UCAS 17025 test lab independently do the test, but they actually adopted the kit. So we were fully compliant with the setup, used the setup, did our our sort of making sure it tweaked and everything was fine, ready for test. And then we said down tools, handover. We put in the calibrated instruments on the same setup which we'd used, and they oversaw that and issued a formal report. So that is, you know, that could maybe bring some savings if, for example, a company's got experience, but they're not going to have the overhead of being accredited to do it themselves and maintain that. But they could get an organization to come in and maybe do the test using the client's, you know, a friendly client, or you know, not a formal test site. But if you've got equipment and knowledge, it might bring some of the costs down.
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
one
I mean,
approach we've taken.
oh, sorry, Patty, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, it was just to say that's one approach we've taken. We had to sort of, well, actually put transformer in to match the voltages expected in this country, in the country it was going to be going to, with a special inverter and with capped power. So we got an independent test report done, but we've done all the measurements ourselves with the same basic mast, same type of instruments, but we kind of changed out for the formally calibrated ones. And the test organization adopted all that equipment. So we probably saved ourselves about, I don't know, 25% of the overall cost, maybe something like that for the testing by doing that, maybe more even.
And you're saying that was at a site that's not at your test site?
Yeah. It's basically, it's a client. It's about 12 miles drive from Blackpool, very flat, and basically the guy gets a big hamper at Christmas for letting us do it. We also give him extra sort of free servicing of his turbines, so he gets a bit more attention to his product. He's had those turbines for 10 years, so there's two of them, and we actually did an acoustic test on the site and managed to get both tests done at the same time, more or less. We boxed clever with the positioning of the mast, so we were 2D away for the main test turbine and 4D away from the other turbine, which allowed us to do the acoustic test on one mast with instrumentation. So there's things, you know, if there's a bit of knowledge within the company, and that might happen as companies grow, that they become, you know, be able to sort of work well with either a 17025 or a 17065 certification body. So it's something to maybe sort of think about, you know, retaining some in-house experience as you move forward with your products.
And Joe, you were basically saying something similar, right? You can work with someone at their site and you can work as a consultant to help do the testing.
Yeah, I mean, right, to go back to the question, no, I don't think it's difficult at all at your own site. I think as long as it's set up in according with the standards, and, you know, I mean, with somebody who has experience, obviously, you know, doing that sort of thing, you know, such as myself for sure, you know, but, you know, 17065 and data acceptance and witness testing is all normal stuff for certification bodies. And as long as you're doing it with qualified personnel, you know, it's not an issue. And I would say, obviously, you don't, you know, want to test in a location where you're not going to get appropriate wins for testing. You know, that's important as well, for sure. But if you know, you got to weigh all the costs at maybe you've got, you know, I always tell people this all the time. At a customer site, you know, you don't have to install it and remove it afterwards, right? You know, so if you can get a customer site to do it, or if you already have it somewhere at your location where you can test it and install it for much cheaper, that's a huge cost to the process. And test laboratories are expensive. And SWCC does not require accredited testing. They'll also take witness testing under the, you know, in the US market for the ANSI 101-1 standard, right? So, you know, all those things, I think it's more than achievable. And if anybody wants to do it, I'm more than happy to help.
Gotcha.
So is there any like a list of certifying agency or companies available, or something like that, or we can certify it from anybody, like third party?
There was a list of certification bodies in my presentation on day 2.
Okay.
And if you want to reach out to Brent, he can
Yeah.
pass that list along to you.
Yep. In the US, it's predominantly SWCC, smallwindcertification.org, participating in this particular space of the turbine certification world. But there are others, especially globally.
Another point that sometimes gets missed is that it is entirely possible to do different tests at different locations. So for instance, if you're worried about getting enough hours of high wind speed, you may install the turbine, one turbine in a location that has plenty of wind resource, and just start the clock running and getting the duration test done. And an identical turbine, it has to be identical, can be installed in another spot where you have better access and you've got closer to facilities. You don't have to drive 5 hours to get to it to do the instrumented testing.
Right. Of course, the duration test is a lot easier now, but
Yeah,
but it's a good point.
Yep.
Kevin, did you have something you wanted to share? I didn't quite understand your chat, your private chat about a video.
I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. So George, I would say many people come into this process with that thinking. It's like, I think I can do the testing, but I think after many years, only Berge actually did that. Everyone saw the learning curve, the equipment costs, the standards, and the reports they have to write, and shifted their thinking to use an experienced testing person, consultant, testing organization, accredited, not accredited, but none of that really matters as long as someone that has already done it before.
Okay. I have this like kind of a peculiar question. Sometimes some locations doesn't have like too much wind, so they will never have wind more than 30-40 miles per hour. But we have to test the windmills like up to category 3, 4, 5 wind speed, right? So maybe 130, 40 or something. So
Yep.
let's say if we designed a windmill to be located in certain area where the wind speed never goes above 60 or something. So do we still have to certify it for a wind speed of 120 or something like that? So it's
Right.
just like a question wherein like the design changes, the cost changes, everything changes. But are we applying the same conditions or rules for the area where I'm gonna put the windmill where there is no wind which goes beyond certain point, and it's like based on historical records, we will never have a wind more than 40-50 miles per hour or something like that.
All right. I mean, you do have to fulfill some relatively high wind requirements, but it's more like 15 meters per second for a little while. And you do some calculations on the 1 and 50-year extreme winds, but you don't have to test it in that 50-year extreme wind of, 40 meters per second, 100 miles per hour. That's another reason for simulation. You can simulate these extreme events in the aeroelastic model simulation, and then test in the field where the turbine is actually not going to see this 50-year extreme that you simulated. So it's kind of a combination of testing and simulation that paints a decent picture of an evaluation.
I was going to just suggest there is a possible approach might be, I think if you've got a family of tower heights that you're planning to sell to the market, I think you can do the power performance test on however high a tower you like, and I think with the new emphasis of some of the higher winds being left for the safety and function test, and the duration test, you could pick sites for doing the various tests, but if you wanted to get you through your power performance curve and you were constrained to a site which maybe wasn't as windy as you'd like for that, you could actually use your tallest of your towers As long as you've got
Yeah.
your design calcs to cover that, that's one approach. Because I know in America it's
It is.
quite you chase the wind by going higher and higher as you can. So
Right.
that might be one approach, because you can actually test small turbines. If you can, I think it's got to be at least 10 meters high. I think if you don't have a design, and you can test it on that, even if it's not your production tower, just to get the power performance done. But taking that a bit further, if you're trying to get higher winds and you're actually doing the full formal power performance curve, and it's not as windy as you'd like to get through that quickly enough, you could, as I said, just chase the wind by going up a bit higher. Might help you nudge up some of the wind speed bin populations.
That's right. Don't test on a short tower. That's a good tip.
Yeah.
The other thing to remember is you have the S class.
Mhm.
True.
However, you may limit your market if you
Yeah.
set your criteria too low.
Mm.
Or too high. Like,
Only if somebody's smart enough to know what class S is, Robert.
Well,
Actual-
in your proposal too, NREL is likely, I can only guess, if you propose certifying to a class S and you do something that's so low that they don't think there's a viable market, you're going to hurt your score in your proposal. That's how that'll come in.
Sure. You know I'm kidding with you.
all right. Well, we've basically made it to the end here of our extended, a little bit every day CIP workshop this week. So congratulations.